Good morning. I'm Sven Masterson, one of the principal mentors and founders of the community Mentoring Men. And one of the reasons men reach out to us frequently is for help reconciling relationships. These are relationships that are in danger of divorce, maybe that where there's separation, affairs, and whatnot. And we have a pretty great reputation for seeing men turn that around. And interestingly, this creates a little bit of a problem for us because, you see, we're really actually not about reconciliation. We're about restoration, not of the relationship, but of men. And so one of the things we spend a lot of time working with men on when they come to us in hopes of achieving reconciliation is helping them turn this perspective around and actually change from focusing on reconciliation to instead seeing the need for deep and personal transformation. And for the ones that have that shift, who are willing to let us guide them to seeing it a little differently, they tend to have a really, really high success rate of not just having personal transformation, but from that place of personal transformation, experiencing reconciliation, and not just of their marriage or their primary romantic relationship, but things like relationships with children, relationships with career. This is usually a time when men go on to find extreme new senses of mission and purpose. And so it tends to be a really fantastic experience. But it's really, really hard to get men to see that what they need is transformation and restoration. So what do we mean by this word restoration? Well, I want you to think about a man similar to an automobile. If you want to go somewhere, and especially somewhere there's a great distance, you need a reliable form of transportation to get you there. You need a vehicle to get you there. And when men come to us seeking reconciliation, they're seeking a destination. The problem is it hasn't really deeply occurred to them that the vehicle that got them to destruction, that got them to separation, that got them to divorce, that got them to having affairs in the relationship, that really all of the junk going on, there was a vehicle that got them there. And if you don't change that vehicle, then you can't go to a new destination. And so when we're focused on a destination like reconciliation, and we try to go there in the same vehicle that took us to devastation, it just doesn't work. And so we focus on, instead, the vehicle, changing the man's vehicle. What vehicle got you to devastation? And what vehicle do you need in order to get to restoration? Now, one principal way we are very different than most men's work is a lot of men's work just says, lose weight, start going to the gym, start eating right, sleep, etc. And, if she doesn't ship up, just like kick her to the curb. That's a really kind of common mentality in men's work that tries to just make a few external changes, maybe a few attitude changes, sow some new habits, and then tell you if it's still a problem, you have a bad partner, get out. And we feel like that is an extremely shallow and non-transformative approach to men's work. Not that we have any issue with doing those things. They're a vital part of a man's journey, but they're somewhat shallow external things. And if you don't go deeper than that as a man and with a man in the process of restoration, then it generally doesn't really accomplish anything. It doesn't give him a remarkably new vehicle, and so he can't get to the destinations that he wants to get to in life. Losing weight doesn't generally turn a marriage around. Quitting drinking alone doesn't generally turn marriage around. Picking up a few new habits, as good as they might be, is generally not going to turn a marriage around. It's not going to end the destruction that is taking place because of just how depraved the vehicles we drive are. And so when we work with a man about restoration, we're after a total transformation of that man. And that's at a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and relational level. Now, I said spiritual there, and that freaks some people out. They think, are you guys a religious organization? No, we're not. When we say spiritual, you might consider that consciousness if you're not from a background that appreciates spiritual things. We just mean the part of you that you can't point to and say, it's right here, it's right there, and the part of you that you characterize as maybe your deeper or higher self. And those 5 areas are really generally really messed up in a man who's experiencing these things in his life. And yet he's generally blind to this, and he believes he has a relationship problem or a partner problem. And that guy is tenaciously trying to fix the change to experience a change in his partner or the relationship. He's focused on the destination. And to be frank, we can't really help those guys while they think that way. They still come to us, they still participate, but if they don't have a change from that perspective, we can generally predict they're not going to be successful in either a transformation or a reconciliation. You know, there's a famous French philosopher, you have to pardon my French, I'm not very good at French, I think his name was Rousseau, who's known to say, man is born free and everywhere is in chains. And that's really what we would identify as kind of the root problem. At least in our generation, men that are alive today, though they were born free, are living in some sort of chains. They're living in some sort of slavery. Now, generally, that slavery is dependence. And what I mean by that is that man has exchanged some part of his fundamental freedom and agency over himself, and he's given it to other people in his life. And he's done that with the hope and expectation that if he gives them something, they give him something back. And this is kind of one of those root causes we help men to uncover and repair, is their dependency on external things, because those dependencies essentially enslave us to who we are dependent on. And it sounds like some wonderful idea maybe in rom-coms and our media to be dependent on a romantic partner, but it is actually a surefire way to destroy the long-term vitality and health in a relationship, because that person becomes essentially obligated and to provide that need on an ongoing basis. And this sours a long-term relationship like marriage. And so this is a core area that we work on, helping a man restore freedom. It reminds me of actually another quote, which is, famous in anytime new tech comes out. It's famous in political talk. Ben Franklin said something like, whoever would give up a little essential liberty for a little bit of security deserves neither liberty nor security. Now, I like to think about that quote in the context of men's work as well, because what we find in men, and we found in our own lives too, is that we have learned to give up a lot of liberty as individuals and a lot of that ownership and agency over self, and we hand it to our partner, to our wives, to our employers, to religious leaders, to political leaders, to all kinds of people. We dole out all these liberties, and we're doing it for the promise of a little bit more security. But that security is a lie. It's actually just the belief that that person is going to keep giving me this thing that I've entrusted them to do. And that, brother, is what starts to erode a long-term relationship. And so what we're about on Mentoring Men is the transformation of men at this deep level of unlocking their hearts and minds and letting that permeate upward and outward through their body, through their mental health, through their emotional health, through their relational health, and through their physical health. And so I want to encourage you, if you are a man who is seeking reconciliation, stop. I know that sounds paradoxical. I really do. I talk to hundreds of men a year about this, and everyone looks at us a little cross-eyed, like, what are you saying? That's the one thing I want. But I'm telling you that because as long as you're focused on reconciliation, the destination, you're very, very, very unlikely to get there. When I was a young man, I grew up down in the state of Maryland. I did a lot of mountain biking. And one of my favorite places to mountain bike was this area called the Frederick Watershed. And it had these great downhills that you could just bomb down, but always at the end would be some really steep and significant climbs. And in mountain biking, kind of one of the paradoxes there too, is you have to stay in a high gear when you're going down the hill and you're facing a climb that's coming up. And you had to get the timing just right, because if you downshifted too early, you would lose your power going down the hill. And if you did it too late, when you started the climb, you're in way too high a gear and that in order to climb. And so you had to be really good about anticipating when to shift and knowing when to shift into low gear, and then not focusing on the top of the climb, but just a few feet ahead. We always call this kind of your event horizon. And so what I would do to climb those hills is I would focus just 20 feet out or so. I would pick an object like a tree, and I would kind of picture I was making a mental lasso to that tree. I would be in a low, slow gear, and I would just steadily and consistently and reliably keep my pedal cadence going to that tree. And then I'd get to that tree and I'd pick another one. And next thing you know, I was at my destination, the top of these steep climbs. Now, all you people out west are probably laughing if you've ever been to the east. We don't have steep like the west does, but it was hard riding. And the same kind of thing is metaphorically true for a man who's experiencing a relational crisis. He's been pedaling downhill, going through life, getting up every day, going to work, and then suddenly his partner says, I don't love you anymore, I need space, I love you but I'm not in love with you, I'm having an affair, I want a separation, I want a divorce. And that man is suddenly facing this massive climb, and all he can think about is getting to the top of that climb. And the top of that climb is reconciliation. And I want you to picture that like it's got some sort of gold, shining object at the top. It becomes an obsessive focus for a man to reach this reconciliation. But if that man doesn't understand the mechanics of what's going on and drop into a low gear and focus on something other than the top, he won't get there. He'll be like that mountain biker like I used to be, where you find yourself in the wrong gear and your legs just have no power in that gear. And I remember feeling sometimes like a sheet of plywood just falling over, and usually with some sort of injury. And I don't know if you've ever tried to start a climb, halfway up a climb, but it's way harder than if you just start at the bottom with a consistent and reliable cadence and momentum. And so that's exactly our approach on mentoring men when we work with men. We try to get their focus off the top of the hill, and we try to show them, those who will let us, how to downshift into that granny gear. And that granny gear, that low gear, is where you actually have the most capacity for change. It's low, it's slow, and you can put power in those legs, and you can do your best climbing. And that granny gear is personal transformation. That means taking your eyes off the relationship, taking your eyes off of reconciliation, taking your eyes off of her, taking your eyes off of your partner, off of your circumstances, and turning all of that energy and focus inward to your own transformation. If you are identifying with what I'm saying, if you're feeling a little pricked, like, hey, this guy's, what he's saying makes sense to me, I want to invite you to have a talk about this, right? You'll see below this video, there'll be a link where you can request a free session with myself or one of the other mentors, and we'll give you, an hour and a half in a one-to-one face-to-face call. We're not going to try to sell you anything. We'll be honest about what we do and what opportunities are there, but there's a zero sales pitch session. We just listen to what's going on. We want to hear about what happened to you, what's going on in your relationship, how you think you got there, and then we'll offer you some help turning that focus back down to that granny gear and showing you how to climb big hills, the big hills that feel impossible. And by doing that, the irony is you're the most likely to have that reconciliation. And that's why our members have such a high degree of success in that. It's because they've actually all committed themselves to stopping their seeking of reconciliation and instead focus on restoration and transformation. I would love to talk to you more about this. Scroll down, click that link, fill that form out, and before you know it, we'll be on a Zoom call talking about your story. With that, I'll wish you a great day and a pleasant weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.